Welcome to this Partnership Board meeting of Transport for the South East. So we come into introductions. I think we don't have any new introductions to today. We have apologies today from Councillor Lynn Stagg, Councillor Rob Humby, Councillor Alan Janet, sorry, I will come back now, Councillor Tony Page, Councillor Eamon Keogh, Ian Phillips, Ellie Burrows and Heather Preen. And we've got Gary here from Medway. Are there anybody else that we haven't seen? Welcome, John. And John here from Department for Transport. I think everybody else is known to us, so thank you all very much. So if we can start with the minutes from the previous meeting, draft minutes have been circulated. So it was the Partnership Board meeting on the 23rd of January. Are we happy to accept them as a true record? Thank you. We have declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest that are not already being declared? Relevant to agenda items? Thank you. Statements from the public. There are no statements from the public today. So in welcoming you all and getting through the preliminaries, we come to the most important, I think, part of today's meeting, which is the strategic investment plan. And I think all of us that have been on this journey will recognise how much time and effort have gone in to get this far. 5 years of hard work, and it will be the blueprint for investment for the South East for the next 30 years. So it is a significant document. And again, I can thank you all for your support and your colleagues before you. It's been a long journey, but we'll now open it up for debate, and I'll ask Rupert to introduce, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So members will recall at the November board meeting, you agreed the draft strategic investment plan and integrated sustainability appraisal subject to some minor text changes. Since November, almost immediately after that November board meeting, we made some changes to recognise the individuals' local transport authorities' net zero targets. We also ensured that the SIP ask, the strategic investment plan ask, is above and beyond local transport authority allocations, and then there were a series of minor text changes. This then allowed members and local transport authorities to take the strategic investment plan through your own processes should you need to do so, and a number of you have done that. I think, Chairman, it's just important to remind ourselves that this is the culmination of 5 years of evidence gathering and work, starting with the economic connectivity review, leading into the transport strategy, and then the strategic investment programme, that, to my mind at least, sets out that once-in-a-generation opportunity to lay out the interventions and policies, global policies, required to transform the South East in terms of connectivity and mobility. There is a credible and robust evidence base that sits behind the SIP itself. And Chairman, I'm extremely grateful to the officers from the constituent authorities and other stakeholders, but particularly the officers from the constituent authorities who have worked hard with the Transport for the South East team to ensure evidence from local transport authorities is fed into the strategic investment plan. And of course, also noting the work of the Department for Transport, and particularly the role of the analysts from the DFT who have supported us, checked, tested and challenged the evidence as we've run through the evidence base to the SIP. So this gives that 30-year outlook for the interventions within the region. As I said, I believe this is a once-in-generation opportunity to provide that advice to the Secretary of State. And I think, subject to the board's agreement today, The SIP will wind its way to the Secretary of State swiftly to provide that clear advice. Subject to the board's agreement today, that's what will happen to the SIP. I should point out that the SIP is not a static document. It will need to be refreshed, as our transport strategy will need to be refreshed to take account of new evidence, new policy changes, new legislative changes. But today it represents our intent of £45 billion worth of expenditure for the next 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Goodness. Thank you, David. Elaine.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to give off that we've invited her because I think we've heard from our colleague last time. I mean, obviously we want this document to be as green as it can be. We'd like people to try to take part in the consultation. The results of the public consultation were very much in favour of sustainable transport, decarbonisation, and that kind of thing.
Right.
So, we're obviously. Oh, thank you.
Again, do I?
No, it's for our colleagues who
Oh, okay.
I think.
All right then. So we're not doing any big road building here, but so it would be odd for us to be fully supportive of those projects ourselves when for us and for everybody, I think, public, improvements to public space and walking routes and active travel and health, and that's where we see the value. And obviously, I'm very welcoming of the active travel focus, carbon reduction proposals, and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I'm just trying to think. Just trying to get to the bit there. So it does say we should prioritise improvements to public transport and reducing car use, tackling climate change. So this is good. We have a 2030. Obviously, some of our authorities here have a 2030 target to become carbon neutral. Not all do, which is, first obviously is disappointing because I think the climate emergency is happening now. But I can appreciate, people have their priorities and we all have to do what we can within where we are, and not all the things we do are down to us, and some of them are down to national highways and all of that sort of thing. But I really appreciate, it's all coming together, having a strategic document, working together, and I think ultimately we will all benefit from it. So I just wanted to say that today, that we'll be supporting it for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm sure we all agree the green travel and the way of changing people's mode of transport from cars to public transport is something that will need to happen over time if this plan is to be delivered. So I think we all have the same goal there. So that's really good. Joy. Yeah, please. Just.
Thank you. I'm not sure what pages we're supposed to be looking at here, but I'm assuming it's 136 as well. I suppose what I want to focus on is how we're going to work this, because obviously we've just had the very disappointing news that the A27 Arundel has been put back and the A27 Chichester has been put back. And I have to bluntly say the A27 thought consultation for the Worthing Lancing, called it tinkering around, is frankly quite disappointing. So I was very pleased to see that the whole solution for the 27 relies on an end-to-end approach for this highway, but it really is about how we actually get joined up thinking here. Yep. And how obviously we're looking for the TfSC to support us on some joined up thinking as those other local authorities who have the A27 running through them. Yep. I just thought I'd make that point. Also, really thinking about the partnerships we have with the other bodies, including sort of water boards, Natural England, energy companies, etc.
Good, thank you. And the point you raised about the 27, we'll pick that up under another agenda item later. But you're very clear, and our colleagues in Kent will be disappointed that the Lower Thames crossing has been slowed back a bit. But John, did you want to comment on that now, or would you rather not make a comment at all?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So obviously, I understand they'll be disappointed in the news that you received last week. Hot off the presses, and we're still working through the exact timings and timescales on that, but we'll definitely be engaging with you over the coming sort of weeks and months on all of that. Good. While I've got the mic, I should also just offer good words from DFT as well on the strategic plan.
Yes, please.
It's really, really good bit of work, and we're really sort of grateful for the way that Rupert and the whole of TFSE work with department and across with other STBs as well, and sort of leading the debate, across the country, I think, with STBs as well as in the southeast. So it's a really good bit of work, and look forward to receiving the final draft very soon.
Good. Thank you. And I take it from your comment that actually having a SIP, in fact, might enhance the deliverability of some of these schemes, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, rather than us all going individually. So I hope that the work that's gone into this clearly sets up the strategic need across the whole area, and so I'm sure from our perspective we find that as an imperative for why we've done what we've done. So hopefully DFT did as well.
Yeah, well, it absolutely strengthens the case, and it's really, really important to know that partners in the broader area are working together.
Good. Did you want to come back, Joy, or were you happy with that one? Okay, good. We'll pick that up later. Any other comments on the SIP document itself? Because Gary.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought it was a very interesting document, and I'd just like to say this is my first meeting, but I can imagine there's an awful lot of work that's gone into this document to produce such a good document that covers a large area, geographical area, yeah, and a very important area. So I'd just like to say thank you to all your hard work over the last 5 years, really. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was a much shorter discussion than I'd expected, but we have 5 years to get this right, and I think that shows in the document. So, the recommendations are on the screen. So are we happy to, you don't need me to read them out, you can read as well as I can. So are we happy to approve as printed? Thank you very much indeed. So then we come to the SIP communications plan, and Holly?
Thank you. Sorry, I've made a swift move to up here. Yes, so thank you very much. So following approval of the final draft of the strategic investment plan, we will now set about publicising that and letting everyone know that it has been finally approved. The first part of that will be to publish the strategic investment plan on our website, along with the full suite of documents, so the whole evidence base that sits behind it. So there's a total of 23 documents, which includes the strategic narrative for the SIP, the thematic plans on levelling up, decarbonisation, rail, bus, mass transit and shared mobility, strategic active travel and micromobility and highways, strategic programme, outline cases, options assessments and evidence-based reports for each of the defined geographical areas. So we want to make absolutely sure that all of that evidence base is there and visible for everyone. So they will be published on the TFSE website later today. We will also be submitting a hard copy of the strategic investment plan to the Department for Transport. Within the board papers, you have got a draft of a letter from Councillor Glazier to the Secretary of State for Transport that will accompany that hard copy. We have also got hard copies available for all board members today, and then we'll be sending some further copies to relevant ministers as well at the department. So if you would like a hard copy, then do let us know, because we've got copies here for you today. Once we have done all of that, it will kick off a number of other things. So we've got a media release. There is a copy of that within the board papers for you to have a look at and approve today. That will be published probably tomorrow. And we will also be promoting the final draft across all of our social media channels, so Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. And we've also provided draft copy for yourselves. So we really appreciate and value all of the support that we've had from our constituent authorities up to now. And if you would like to share and celebrate with us the final approval, we have provided some draft copy for newsletters, press release and social media. That is all within the board papers as well. Of course, if you do want me to send that over separately, then please let me know and we can arrange for that as well. In September, we are planning to host a TFSE conference. That will be in celebration of the final draft of the strategic investment plan. The plan is for it to be titled Connecting the South East, Delivering Our Strategic Investment Plan. So last year's event was about developing it. This is very much moving on to that next stage. So the purpose of that event will be to bring together delivery partners and stakeholders from across the region who have been instrumental to the development of our SIP, as well as industry experts and delivery partners that will be crucial in the delivery phase. You're all very, very aware that over the duration that we've been developing the strategic investment plan, we have we've implemented various different techniques in order to communicate with members of Parliament throughout this time. And we've gratefully received a lot of advice and support from yourselves on the best ways to approach them and how to engage them. And to continue this, we've actually developed a suite of fact sheets specifically targeting MPs. There are 30 of them, and they've been split down into geographies and groupings of constituencies that make the most sense. So obviously, a lot of the interventions within the strategic investment plan aren't confined to a specific geography. They do span others. So that has been considered, and Steer have gone through a huge amount of work to make sure that the groupings make sense and offer the best kind of explanation of the strategic investment that's required for that area. There is a copy for the Isle of Wight as an example available within the board papers for your approval. If you are happy with those, they will also then be sent out to MPs via email after this board meeting. And the purpose is just to aid their understanding and their ability to then communicate the benefits of the SIP with their constituents and other people that they might be communicating with. As I said, there is an example within the board paper. The plan is for all of these to also be uploaded to the TFSE website, so they'll be available for everyone to download. So while we've created them with MPs in mind, they will be beneficial to town and parish councils, districts and borough councils, to yourselves in discussing the benefits of the strategic investment plan. And that is all from me.
Thank you. Something comes immediately to me, and I've seen you may have said it and I missed it. Was the individual fact sheets for MPs. Will you ensure that the board members in the geographic areas get them? And then a question for David really is, how should we think about sharing our information with the borough and district councils as well? So I don't know whether you can communicate with David as to whether there's another plan, because almost certainly will come within the MP's geography, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the board members for each relevant fact sheet will be copied into that email, so you will be able to see what has been sent out. But yeah, absolutely welcome any conversation about how we distribute that further to districts and boroughs.
Just trying to head off the phone call that says, what do you think about this? What the hell are you talking about? So that'd be good, I'm sure. Are there any other comments or questions? Dan.
Thanks. Yeah, just necessarily like the regional fact sheets. Like the regional fact sheets, so thanks for those. I think all politics is local, so in some ways, I think in terms of engaging with sort of local community groups, residents, businesses, and politicians, they're probably be the ones that people most look at. So they're going to be on the website. That's great, and if you tip us off when they've gone up there, that will be useful. But I was actually also looking at the social media plan over the weekend. Same comment really, and whether we should think about, even if it's just like one social media post, which we replicate across social media channels, having a post for each of those 30 regions to engage with, because the regional single post is great, but actually I suspect people will come to life a bit more when they see what it really means on their doorstep, rather than this big, £40+ billion package. But well done on that.
Thank you. Yeah, very happy to provide a more localised social media message that can go out with the fact sheets. That's not a problem at all.
Thanks.
Good. Any other comments or questions? No? Again, the recommendations are up on the screen. Are we happy to approve the approach and the letters of department and agree the fact sheet? Thank you. God. I'm tempted to say I better slow down, but towards the end of the meeting, we come on to the SIP delivery plan. And Sarah, you're going to introduce? I'm there already. Well done.
As if by magic.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Afternoon, everybody. So this paper in front of you now is to provide an update on the delivery of the strategic investment plan. It falls into a number of parts, and I'll probably introduce each part in turn and then pause for any questions around them. So first of all, just to say that obviously delivering the SIP, there are nearly 300 interventions within the SIP. And to deliver those, it's going to require a number of partners to work together. And there are going to be a number of different approaches needed depending on exactly what scheme it is that's being brought forward. So in terms of the delivery action plan, we've held some previous workshops with your officers to look at each of those plans in detail and to understand what the current position is with each of the schemes, what the next steps are, and what resources, both in terms of personnel, funding and analytical tools, are required in order to bring them forward. Bearing in mind that the STB's role is also to provide advice to government on transport investment priorities in our area, we also need to develop a methodology to enable us to filter those schemes and provide sort of top 10 lists or priority lists as and when those might be required. So since the last update at the January meeting, we've held further workshops with each of the constituent authority officers and looked at making sure we've got all those details right, and also starting to discuss how that prioritisation process can take through. However, both the transport strategy and strategic investment plan very much advocate a multimodal approach to planning, whereas current government policy and funding mechanisms are modal. So we've been grappling a little bit with how we reflect both the multimodal nature of the SIP and the transport strategy that we want to see, but also the need in the short term at least to respond to those existing modal funding landscapes. In the January meeting, we did envisage that we would be able to bring to you a draft delivery plan and also a draft prioritisation process, but it's becoming evident that there are a number of quite sort of gritty details that we need to get to grips with. And we need to take our time and make sure we do this in a rigorous way so that we are really happy with the prioritisation method that we come up with. So it's therefore proposed that we actually do some more work now via Transport Strategy Working Group and the senior officer group members as well, before bringing a much more sort of well-rounded proposal to the board, hopefully at the July board meeting. Now's probably a good time to mention, if you want to go back to perhaps Richard Lennon from National Highways and the announcement that came out last week, because obviously the delivery action plan, perhaps more so than the SIP, needs to be a document that responds to change as and when different announcements are made. So I don't know if it's now an appropriate time to suggest perhaps Richard comes in.
Leonard, Head Network Development at National Highways. Great to be here. I just thought we'd have a little bit more of a discussion around the announcement last week by the Secretary of State for Transport. There are a number of important announcements for TFSE. I just thought we'd have a little discussion around that, if I may. The Secretary of State talked about headwinds in terms of inflationary costs and pressures, which I think we all recognise, not only from National Highways, but Network Rail and other partners across the transport portfolio, and the need to balance off those costs against budgets available and affordability. I think it's important to recognise that government reaffirmed its support for a number of key interventions and a number of key transport improvements across the network, and it reinforced its investment in the RIS2, as well as the strategic road network. Obviously, within this region, there was a deferral of Arundel. I think it's quite important to recognise that Arundel, in terms of the DCO decision, is going through just in consultation on Arundel, and that the proposal of start of works as in the consultation of 2024-25, so it's deferred to the next RIS. I think that's the key point. And that further work on the development of pipeline schemes would occur in RIS 4, so that's 2030-35. Again, important to note that the programme for delivery start of works and open for traffic for the RIS pipeline was under development still and will be to end of that RIS. So it's deferring it by a few years, not necessarily deferring it by 5, 6, 7 years. I think that's quite important. Lower Thames Crossing, they reconfirmed their commitment to LTC, which I think is really important. And it allows us the opportunity to do further work under the DCO process underway. And whilst we reflect that there's a number of schemes being deferred, I think it's really important to recognise the government's commitment to roads and commitment to the SRN in terms of taking it forward from this point. In terms of next steps, National Highways is about to launch 3 strategic documents which cover our planning for the future. That is the initial report, which looks at the recommendations and proposals for the next RIS. We're setting out route strategies which build on intelligence, route objectives and locations for further interventions. And the third is connecting the country our long-term strategic plan for 2050. The outcome of the consultation of those documents informs the future government investment for the RIS, so quite important documents. And I do want to say that I think the work you've done around the SIP is really important in shaping the narrative to government around what that investment should be and how that investment shapes up in terms of not just isolated schemes, but the package measures. So, Councillor Dennis, your point on how does the A27 work as a whole is a critical point. It's not just the Arundel scheme, it's how the packages work towards sort of an end goal and end aspiration. So critical important critical to recognise that continued support for the SRN, critical to recognise that the announcements mean deferral for a few years, and critical to recognise that TFSE has a key role in advocating improvements to the SRN and building the case through the consultation process, which hopefully we will start shortly. And that's the update.
Richard, thank you. Any other comments? Joy.
Thank you. You just made, Richard, hi. You just made some comments about the 27. I'm sorry, it sounds rather parochial, but it is a fairly major link across the south. So you were just talking about the fact that Arundel is now in consultation. It's been in consultation. It keeps going into consultation, and actually referred not just to moving it, but also there was environmental and potentially archaeological issues around it too. So I suppose the question I've got is how much will you take impact? How much will you take reference from this document that we just approved in terms of one, actually allocating your resources appropriately, but also under consultation, how much influence will TFSE be in as consultees? Because there's no doubt about it, on the 27 at Arundel, you ignored all the key stakeholders in terms of the route that was selected. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for that. I think in terms of Arundel, TFSE's SIP is quite important in terms of the strategic case. So as you're aware, in terms of government investment decisions and Treasury, it is a strategic case in terms of the outcomes it delivers for government policy, as well as the business case. So it's quite important that the SIP sets out the strategic case in the context of what that investment in isolation means for the corridor, for jobs, prosperity, housing growth, dealing with inequalities and so forth. So the document forms a key backbone to the strategic case and the key backbone to the priorities set by TFSE for government to consider in the round in terms of making this investment decision. That's what SDBs were set up for. They were set up to say to government, these are our priorities. This is what we want for our connectivity across our network. This is the multimodal nature of it. And of course, that evidence is fed in. I also know that the team are speaking to colleagues at TFSE regularly on Arundel, and there's discussions ongoing. I think the important bit on the consultation, it addresses a number of key issues in terms of environmental impacts and also impacts on communities. It's actually there to strengthen the DCO case so that when we do go to inspector, we've ironed out a few of those issues that have been raised previously, and allows us to build a stronger narrative around why the investment in Arundel is important, but also why the investment in Arundel is important in terms of that whole E27 corridor.
I was probably referring to the fact the route that was decided upon was potentially giving you the greatest issues, and that therefore it'd be interesting to see how the stakeholders, consultees, TFSE, line up in future when there's consultations. Yeah.
Rupert, do you want to comment?
Just briefly, I mean, we recognise the challenges on the 27 corridor, so M27 through to A27 and then on to the A259. And what we advocate in the SIP is a corridor approach. And you'll know, Chichester, Arundel, Worthing, east of Lewis, immensely challenging. And I think we will be with you in pushing and asking the Department of National Highways to progress this specific scheme. So it's one component of a broader corridor. And we have said that the issues at places like Arundel and Worthing do need dealing with. And I think the fact that it drops into RIS 3, given that it's still got to go through its orders and all the rest of it, doesn't leave me too disheartened in terms of it being a priority. And we will be urging National Highways and the department to allow that to progress so that from 2025 onwards, construction can start as soon as is practically possible.
I suppose what I'm concerned about is that we'll get one section done and we'll just push the issue to the next section, or it will get pushed back into the next section. So all we're doing is solving one problem, but just actually creating even more of a problem. And that's what I'm saying about a whole through issue needs to be resolved.
Hey, Chairman, you're absolutely right, and that's why I want to consider as a corridor. The reality is that all of the pinch points along that corridor won't be dealt with at the same time. So, for example, in Worthing, whilst we recognise National Highways' desire to put in place some small-scale improvements, actually that doesn't avoid the issue. That avoids the issue, and we think longer-term solutions are needed, which will take time to work through. We think that the strategic economic case that we put forward for the 27 is strong. It is a corridor that would also provide benefits to communities. It would take away some of the division that exists that SRN splits, and would also promote other forms of transport, so particularly bus and active travel, if done right. So I think we would agree with the points that you're making.
It's not. Are there any other points anyone want to raise? Okay, so again, we thank you, Sarah.
Move on to the next part of the report. That was only the first part of the report.
Okay.
But just to say, from my perspective in developing the delivery action plan, I think the bit Richard referred to about us being involved in helping shape the strategic case really allows us that opportunity to pick up all of these wider issues as we continue to work with National Highways going forwards. The next part of the update on the report was around rail, and recognising that a significant part of those 300 interventions that are in our SIP are rail-based, but that also many of them are over and above what's currently included in the Rail Networks Enhancement Programme. Also recognising that with the wider rail reform that's underway, we need to look at how we can influence rail investment in our area. And therefore, we propose working closely with our neighbouring subnational transport bodies of England's Economic Heartland and Transport East to consider that how collectively and alongside DfT and Great British Railways, the South East is represented both through those rail reforms, but also in the delivery of rail services and infrastructure in the future. So it's proposed that we work together, ourselves, Transport East, Economic Heartland, Department for Transport and Great British Railways, and bring some proposals back to the board in July for further consideration and potentially agreement. The next part of my report is around the monitoring and evaluation framework. And again, this sort of provides a further update to the work that has been ongoing since the last board meeting. I think it's very recognised that a clear and robust approach to monitoring and evaluation is absolutely essential if we are able to demonstrate how we are both successfully delivering schemes that are in the SIP, but also to provide that line of sight from the transport strategy through to individual scheme objectives via the SIP and how that golden thread carries through. The January meeting received an update and we're told about plans for a State of the Region report. And work has been progressing on that, and there's an options report around the State of the Region that's included as Appendix 1 to this paper. To be of most benefit, though, and more importantly, to be able to be repeated so we can provide ongoing State of the Region reports, we need to do some more work to determine both which data sets should be monitored and then, more importantly, have further consideration about where it is and isn't appropriate to set ourselves targets and what those targets should be so that we avoid any unintended consequences. So this work is still ongoing. Further work will be undertaken, and subject to the outcomes of that work, we hope to be able to bring a State of the Region report to the board at the July meeting. Lastly, around the analytical framework development, again, previous meeting has had updates on this, and it's accepted that most of the schemes that are within the SIP will at some point in their delivery cycle need a business case. In order to be able to produce those business cases, we need a suite of analytical tools or an analytical framework that collectively those tools can assess the impacts, benefits and costs of all the schemes in order to provide assurance to other DfT or other funding partners or delivery agencies that those schemes are worthy of delivery. In the January meeting, you agreed a 3-year route map for development of the TFSE analytical framework, and that included a small section of accelerated activities that could be brought forward using £280,000 worth of funding from DfT that was within our budget for this current financial year. We subsequently had confirmation that funding will be released by the end of March 2023, and we're looking at how we can bring forward those accelerated activities through various procurement processes. A further funding request is included within our business plan for 23 to 24 in order to continue bringing forward the route map that's been previously agreed. Also, recently Transport for the North have had their funding letter, and they have actually been awarded funding to work with all the STBs collectively to develop a common analytical framework to which we can all use. Our route map that was approved in January had already taken account of that possibility. We have always wanted to work with the other STBs, make best use of their learning, and look at how we can do things better together. So that is already included within the plans. So we very much welcome that funding that Transport for the North received, and will continue to work very closely with them as they take forward. I think we're in a bit of a unique position as an STB that we can actually be the guinea pig to help Transport for the North work out what it is they need to do, and then we will be on a front foot as that analytical framework is developed. So that's 4 things. The recommendations are on the screen. I believe there's 2 slides. I just click the next button, hopefully. So there, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on the second bit? I mean, I think it's good news that we got money out of DFT to continue with our work now, which will help us to progress and help Transport for the North with their major tasks. So it's good stuff. I think.
Thank you. 2 things. I was just looking at metrics. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the meeting where you discussed the metrics. First one was the road safety one, which is where Kent, which I was really interested in, Dan, that you've adopted a Vision Zero target with a 50% reduction in KSIs by 2030. I'd be really interested to know how that is going to achieve that one, unless it's to ban motorcycles on our roads or something. But that one I was very curious about. But actually, more interestingly, it was where we had our indicator ideas for the annual report, and we talk about cycling, but we don't talk about, it's active travel, and we don't talk about walking. And given the fact that active travel, particularly, seems to be their new focus, is actually walking schemes, not actually just cycle schemes, and probably they've realised that most people were more likely to walk the last mile rather than cycle. I'm glad they woke up to that. I was just concerned that we have, and we've also got the LT 120, which obviously holds us a hostage to fortune as well.
Yeah, just to say, walking and cycling is absolutely key to where we're going. And as a lifelong motorcyclist, I don't understand quite what you're saying, but we'll move on to Rupert.
The active travel stuff is important, and the challenge in determining metrics is recognising who's best placed to have it. And local transport authorities are best placed to deliver local walking and cycling measures. And they're doing an admirable job across the region. And I don't think it's for Transport for the South East to determine whether or not a footway is in place or a cycleway. That said, I do think it is a supportive role that we have, both in developing business cases, but also recognising there are some national cycle networks and regional cycle networks that have a bearing on all of us, and we can advocate strongly for that.
Sorry. So what you're saying is these are really more national or across boundaries rather than what I call localised LSWIP type schemes.
I think it's not for us to sort of mark the homework of local transport authorities where they are best placed to do the delivery. And frankly, you have your own democratic structures to do that. You don't need us. We're here to support and recognise where there's regional or national cycle networks, for example, or national walking routes that may have a bearing. We can support those.
Thank you.
Dan.
Can I build on that, comments on KPIs and metrics?
Can't have both of them.
Recognising the fact that the TFSE is trying to be top-down, strategic, influential, and multimodal, there are 1 or 2 KPIs here or metrics which are very much modal, but there doesn't seem to be anything that really brings things together. So, for example, and I may have skimmed this too rapidly, so apologies if I've missed something, but there are a couple of things on journey times by rail, there are a couple of things on journey times along road corridors, but there isn't as much about the end-to-end journeys, and again, your point there, Joy, about the sustainable modes. There isn't the mention of, and I hesitate to say this, scooters or any other things. So the cycle bus is very conventional, and we don't know what conventional is going to be in 5, 10, 15 years' time. So, but we would like to start gathering the data now, I suppose. There's a question in there somewhere.
Sarah, would you like to comment?
Yeah, standing here listening to the discussion is exactly reinforces what we put in the report of where we come to about the need to get this right and make sure we are measuring the right things in the right way for the right reasons. I think an example that we were discussing in the office the other day around active travel was we could measure length of cycle lane delivered. Well, that's lovely, but is it any good? Does it go where people want? It's not necessarily the right metric. So I think the discussions are really helpful and really welcome the views, and that's why we need to take a bit more time to make sure we are getting the right things and measuring the right things in the right way.
I think we can also be courageous. TFSE is one of the leading subnational transport bodies. we can set some metrics which others can then copy, so set the benchmark.
Yep. The ambition is there, so I think there's no reason to stop us. We just need to be realistic along the way. Any other comments or questions? We've had the recommendations in 2 tranches. Are we happy to take the recommendations as printed? Thank you very much. So we now come on to the financial update. Rachel, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. This paper provides an update on the revenue budget for Transport for the South East. I'll ask you to turn your attention to Appendix 1, which is the financial update for the current financial year to the end of February 2022. And in Appendix 1, you can see the spend position to the end of February this year against the agreed budget and a forecast for the end of year spend. The year-to-date expenditure on the technical programme currently amounts to just over under 1.3 million, and that includes the strategic investment plan, the completion of the area studies, and a number of our ongoing thematic work streams. A number of work streams have commenced in this financial year, which will continue into the next financial year. And as such, the residual budget against those work streams will be carried forward and ring-fenced for their completion in the next financial year. We're currently forecasting that approximately 1.8 million will be spent from the technical programme by the end of March this year. It is subject to change, and the final expenditure figures will be reported to the board at their July meeting. But we are intending to present the first meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee with an updated financial position, and they can hopefully recommend it to the board in July. Just to draw your attention to a couple of other areas, the staffing costs have remained slightly lower than we did budget at the beginning of the year. That's down to the fact that it took us a little longer than we anticipated to recruit some of our members of staff, and also just to reflect staff turnover. The forecast sets out that we're likely to carry forward about £1.3 million worth of funding into the next financial year. A large amount of that is down to the fact that we haven't drawn down everything from the Department for Transport that was included in our grant for this year. So Sarah's just updated on the analytical framework work stream, and you're going to hear about the Centre of Excellence in a couple of items' time. That funding amounts to £550,000, and because of the fact that we haven't received that until March this year, it will be carried forward into the next financial year. So that's why our carry forward figure looks a little bit higher than it maybe should do. I'd also just like to draw your attention to the fact that we do maintain a small reserve. This recognises that TFSE does carry liabilities associated with its staff and complement, and we are intending that the forecast for the reserve at the end of March this year will be just over £361,000. In terms of our grant funding from DFT for the next financial year, board members will recall that we did receive a letter from Baroness Fear in March 2022 setting out an indicative funding allocation for the next 2 financial years. It wasn't intended to be an indicative multi-year funding allocation to allow us to use it for business planning purposes. Because we haven't received our DFT grant funding letter yet, we have confirmed with the department that we will use the 2.065 million figure as the basis of our business planning purposes, and that's what we've based our business plan and our proposed budget for next year on. We are hoping to receive a grant funding letter in due course, and we will provide a verbal update to board members at the next meeting. In terms of the outline budget for 23-24, Appendix 2 sets out a proposed budget for the next financial year. This is a draft budget because we are still waiting on confirmation of our carry forward figures and also confirmation of the DFT grant. But the intention is that the outline budget that we've presented to you today with your agreement, we would start to use as a working budget from the 1st of April. It includes the key work streams that we would like to progress, including a refresh of the transport strategy, or commencing the refresh of a transport strategy, the development of the Regional Centre of Excellence, and the work on the analytical framework that you've just heard about. It also includes provision for ongoing work on the development of our thematic work streams, including EV charging infrastructure, future mobility and freight, as well as some new work streams such as active travel. As per previous years, we have included an allocation for communications and engagement activity and for operational costs. The intention is that we would take the final budget to the Audit and Governance Committee at their first meeting in April and ask them to recommend it to the board at their meeting in July. So Appendix 2 sets out the draft proposed budget for next year. And then finally, I would just like to draw your attention to the annual report and business plan, which are attached as Appendix 3 and Appendix 4 respectively. The annual report sets out our progress over the last 12 months, setting out the work that we've completed to date, and it also provides information on our team, on our governance and our finance. The business plan looks to the next 12 months, and it's been developed in conjunction with the annual budget to reflect the work priorities for the team. The business plan will be formally submitted to government and published on the TFSE website following this meeting. The business plan is attached as Appendix 4. It has been designed as a digital document, which will be made available on the TFSE website, and it identifies 4 priority areas for us to focus on in the next 12 months. That includes the development of the delivery action plan and the analytical framework that you've just heard about. It includes developing and publishing our monitoring and evaluation framework. It includes continuing to support against the DfT priorities, including electric vehicle charging infrastructure, local capability, bus back better, and transport decarbonisation. And it includes the development and implementation of a regional centre of excellence for the South East. The business plan is supported by a much more detailed work programme that the TFSE team use in their day-to-day activities. And we would be happy to share more information with board members if anybody had any further questions on that. That concludes the report. There's 5 recommendations which are set out on the screen there, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Any questions or comments on the budget? Please, Gary.
Thank you. Just looking at the budget for this year, and it's a forecast at the end of February, and it's a year to date to the end of March. There's a lot of figures that you seem to be spending. I'll just pick one, for example. You know, you spent £17 on stakeholder development up to the end of February, and you're forecasting in March you're going to spend 7,000. I mean, and that's repeated on several lines. That the amount of money you spent up year to date compared with the forecast that you're going to spend in March, and we've only got 2 weeks left now, is an enormous jump. Could you just clarify that a bit more?
Yes, we do have a number of invoices which we are due to receive in the next couple of days. And just taking that example, the stakeholder database example, we signed the contract with the provider about a month ago, and we are expecting that invoice to come in. So that one we are hoping will go out the door before the end of the financial year. And that's the same with a number of them. So for example, on the strategic investment plan line, we've just received a sizable invoice through for that. So we are in the process of chasing up our suppliers to get those invoices through. That's why our carry forward figure might change slightly, but the work which you've referenced, it is all ring fenced into the next financial year. So even if we don't get the invoices in the next week or so, it would be carried forward and it would go out the door very quickly in April.
That makes sense.
There are some quite significant jumps, and I'm just saying for the future it would be useful to have a bit better narrative so that we can understand what that's about, because I'm sitting here trying to wonder and I'm sort of guessing, well, not guessing, but working it through from what you said. But I think it would have been more straightforward with narrative between actual and budget, or forecast and budget, because on the face of it, if I looked at it on the face, it doesn't stack up, but having read quite a lot of stuff, it does stack up. But just make it easy for yourself, I think.
No. Any other questions or comments? No. So we have the 5 recommendations on the screen. Are we happy to agree? Thank you. So we come now to agenda item 9, which is the electric vehicle infrastructure strategy. And Ben's going to introduce some of our colleagues. So Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Since the summer of last year, Transport for the South East have been working through the process of developing a regional electric vehicle charging infrastructure strategy for our area. Just to provide you with a bit of background information on this area of work, this project was part of the package of additional SCB work streams that TFSE bid for back in 2021. I think that was around the autumn. The Department for Transport provided us with £100,000 of funding in order to carry out the development of this regional strategy. And then in the summer of last year, we held a competitive tender and evaluation process in which the consultancy Arcadis were successful and therefore were awarded the contract for this commission. Now, one element of work that has been absolutely critical to the development of our strategy is the effective engagement we've had with a wide range of stakeholders. Local transport authorities and other key stakeholders have been fundamental in helping us shape this strategy to date. The knowledge and insight that has been shared with us in relation to charging infrastructure rollout across the South East has been extremely useful, and something that both, I think I can speak on behalf of TFSE and Arcadis, say that we're very thankful for and very much appreciate. In your board packs, you will receive, or you should have received, a draft copy of our strategy. What I would like to do now is just hand over to Kim and Danny from Arcadis, who will briefly introduce themselves before presenting to you an overview of the work that has been completed in the development of our strategy to date. So thank you, Kim, and over to you.
Hi, I'm Kim and I'm the project manager from Arcadis. I just hope Danny, I'm also presenting with Danny.
Yeah. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Danny, I'm head of electric vehicles at Arcadis.
Okay, so this is our presentation. So the contents of the presentation, we're just going to go through the study aim and objectives, and then the programme of the work completed, the stakeholder engagement that was vital to the strategy, the policy and operational context was our first bit of work, into the baselining, look at the charge points in the area, and the forecasting, the methodology and the results, the tool, the EVCI Locate tool, a bit about the vehicle fleet forecasting methodology and the action plan. So the aim of the study was to produce a regional infrastructure strategy and action plan to facilitate the continued rollout of infrastructure in an efficient, cohesive manner. And this contained 6 objectives. The first one, to identify potential demand scenarios for EV infrastructure. The second one was about identifying spatial clusters of charging infrastructure across the region. And then the third one about identifying different levels of engagement and progress within different local authorities and identifying local authorities where more support is needed. The fourth one was about bringing together data on the current and potential future demand from fleets. And then we had a fifth one about highlighting best practice. And then the last one about fostering partnership between the local authorities. So this is the programme. So it consisted of 6 work packages. Work package 1 was the stakeholder engagement, which is gone through the life cycle of the strategy. We started with policy and operational context, then went into establishing the baseline for the region, then into the forecasting, the fleet methodology, and then produced a strategy and action plan. So as Ben mentioned, the stakeholder engagement has been vital. There's been 4 groups set up. The first one, the EV Charging Infrastructure Strategy Steering Group, with representatives from 5 local authorities within the TFSE area. And we had monthly online meetings, and they were with us for each work package and reviewed and presented results of each of the work packages. We also have the forum, which contained the distribution network operators, representatives from the 16 local transport authorities, charge point operators, and lots of others. And then we had the EV infrastructure development working group for the local authorities, and this was made up of the 16 local transport authorities and district and borough representatives. And lastly, the fleet electrification working group, where we had fleet operators, representative bodies. This is such as the NHS, Crown Commercial Services, the BVRLA, and we had 3 online meetings with those. So first work package was the policy and operational context. So we looked at the 16 local authorities in the TFSE area and any current EV strategies that have been published, and also any commitments to do with EVs charging infrastructure from any of the other documents such as climate change strategies or transport plans. We also had a look at any challenges or trends within the EV market, the current charge point technology, any funding that's out there, the different types of operating models for local authorities can own and operate or have a fully funded concession contract. And then the EV market, what it's currently looking like, and also into the distribution network operators' strategies. I'll hand over to my colleague Danny now.
Hello, yes. So the second part of the work was around the baselining. This is very much trying to understand where we were currently when we first started. And you can see from the graph there that there's a big range of different, I don't think all the legend is showing up there for some reason, but gives you an idea of the different trajectories. So the blue line actually is transport for the southeast area, and therefore you look at the percentage of uptake of electric vehicles, and it's ahead of the curve of lots of the nations. So I think England is a green one, for example. Scotland and Wales are on there as well. Looks like a great success story, but also it gives you a bit of a headache because it means you have to provide more charging infrastructure for the vehicles that are out there. Then we looked at the grid, we looked at it with the DNOs, we looked at what was available currently. So we did a typical test for each of the primary substations in the southeast, or transport for the southeast area. The back of a fag packet sum we did basically was if we were to put in 20 50 kilowatt charge points, which is a really good standard of charge point there, would that independent primary substation be able to sustain that? And if it could, then it's one of the green marked ones on the map. If it was kind of whether it would leave only a little bit of headroom left and therefore may cause issue if there was conflicting developments, then it became orange. If it couldn't sustain that fairly substantial level of installation, it would show as red. And some of the grey ones were the ones that the DNOs were already aware of, where there was capacity limits. So there is a range, but I would draw your attention to the numbers in the bottom right-hand corner that there's a vast majority that were green, and therefore there's enough there to play with for the beginning while the DNO and the grid are trying to understand where this capacity sits and what they can do to kind of reinforce it into the future. I don't expect you to see the detail on this graph. You've all got a copy of the strategy itself, but I guess here is the current charge points and the planned charge points. Again, the important part is the table really in the bottom left. We're looking really at the ratio between how many charge points there are to how many vehicles there are in a region. Some of the recommendations and some of the best practice numbers are talking about 10 or 12 vehicles per charge point in terms of public charge points. You can see that the TFSE area is really, really close to the UK average at 16.5 and 16.4 respectively. Obviously, that will change as more vehicles come to the market, but also as significantly larger infrastructure schemes are rolled out. It's not a bad place to be. There's lots of areas that are in much worse situation, but it definitely sets an aspiration, I think, and an expectation going forwards. So that's where we are currently with existing and planned. Then we wanted to forecast what was going to happen next, what would happen next with the vehicles that we're aware of coming to the market. So we looked at the total vehicles that have been registered as electric from DFT figures and ONS figures. We projected those figures forwards then using industry best standard, best practice case studies for growth, using extrapolation methods and also DFT guidance. That then gave us a understanding of how many vehicles will be on the market by set years, how many vehicles therefore will be purchased, and therefore what fleet mix will be electric by 2025 and 2030. And this can give us our kind of scenarios going forwards. We did low, medium, and high for each of these options, so it gives us a range of kind of top end and bottom end. The analysis we've taken from these figures then includes how intensively the vehicles are likely to be used. This uses a typical certain model, Southeast Regional Transport Model. Statistics in terms of journey length and how frequent journeys are, so therefore we can work out roughly what mileage vehicles are doing, which we don't think will be that dissimilar to today's figures, but also that gives us an indication of how intensively the charging infrastructure will be required. And then also from that we can work out the emissions and the kind of the carbon and environmental impacts from that. So that gives us a good idea of what will happen in the future and the kind of consequences of that. I don't intend to go through this in detail. There's a lot on this screen, obviously, but the idea is to show that we've got a range. We use two different kind of calculations to forecast this. We've got national highways, kind of 2% steady growth projection, which is kind of quite well, it's not a million miles away from what we're seeing. And then we've also got a linear extrapolation projection, which basically uses complex maths and formulas to look at the trend of how it's kind of peaking and kind of growing exponentially, and it follows that trend in terms of until we're expecting the government restrictions of banning sale of ICE, petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030 and beyond, so we can start to look at, actually, we know by that point all sales are going to be that kind of vehicle. So just the scale of the challenge, I guess, is what this is showing. We look typically at 3 use cases, and I think the text's a bit funny on here, so apologies for that. But the first one was very much on-street residential. We know it's a massive problem for lots of areas. People that have got driveways, generally it's not a major issue because the charge points are fairly cost effective to put on your driveway. And, having been through that process myself, I can say it's pretty good and takes away a lot of the headache. But for people who don't have access to the driveway, we know it's going to be a big issue, and there's still a lot of political decisions to be made on a local and a national level about whether do we go for on-street things where there's cables, or is there innovative technology that's in street lamps, or is there actually a completely different community-led kind of offer that we need to look at around that. The second one was around kind of town centre. So this is where people aren't travelling that far, and but tend to stay there for a little bit of time so they can kind of charge up. And the final one is tend to people that need to be charging at a faster speed, therefore using more expensive charge points because they've travelled further distances, whether it's for business, whether it's for holiday, whether it's to trip attractors. So, they're not staying there as long, so they need a higher power charger. So they were the 3 kind of use cases. Just to give you an idea of the range of charge points for each of these, obviously, this was across the southeast and by 2030. So, we're not talking about small numbers of charge points here. There's a big growth coming, whether we like it or not. And therefore, we're going to have to try and work out how to provide this. But I don't want to cause alarm. These numbers, obviously, are partly going to be delivered by commercial entities who will obviously try and make a pound out of it, which is, the way the world works. But also, I think the role we were trying to understand and trying to lay out more is around how we can track this, how we maintain kind of the data, and how we then try and fill in the gaps, or at least are aware of the gaps when they arise. The tool that Kim mentioned, EVCI Locate, is our in-house tool. We've developed it in collaboration with the Ordnance Survey, and it's won a couple of awards. But the idea is that we put lots of data into this model, and it kind of colour codes the map based on how suitable an area is for electric vehicle charging. So some of the stuff at the bottom there, it takes into account the current electric charging network, it takes into account types of land, it takes into account whether it's going to be a flood zone or not, proximity to transport interchanges, proximity to highway network, SRN. And you can see from the map there that the dark green areas are the areas where it's more likely to be an attractive site for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The red or orange bits are probably less likely, whether it's to do with flood, whether it's to do with the available energy in the grid, or whether it's to do with there's already a lot of charge points already there, so they're not necessarily a priority. But again, this is tracked, and I think we're going to see a local view now. So Ashford there, so we can see actually the greener is the better, but you can see elements of floodplains and rivers there that are strongly influencing whether we think, we know electric and water don't necessarily mix regardless of standards. But yeah, there's also, as you move out of an urban area, typically it gets a little bit less dense, and therefore the demand for electric charging is a little bit less. So just give you an idea, a run through of kind of the tool we've been using. I'm going to pass back to Kim now.
The vehicle fleet forecasting methodology is currently in development with plans to be completed by the end of April. We've currently had 2 meetings of the vehicle fleet working group, and we've been collating data and across the whole region and nationally to develop these forecasts for future. So currently we're working on a questionnaire to send out to understand the type of data that's available to help us develop forecasts for fleet, as it's currently focused on private cars and vans. So the development of the strategy culminates in an action plan. So the action plan consists of 14 actions, and they split into the different 5 categories. The role we see TFSE playing is as a facilitator role to bring local authorities together to share best practice knowledge, to understand where they are, and to help for the local authorities develop their own electric vehicle charging infrastructure strategies. So as you hear, one is to continue about the EV Forum. There's a couple of actions about different working groups. Another is about regional collaboration, and then targeted engagement and updating, adapting and progressing it further given the rapid change in the market. So this goes on to the 14 actions as part of the action plan. I'm not going to go into them all in detail as they're in the strategy and action plan. So one was about continuing our EV forum, and then we have 2 with working groups, and it's about continuing the 2 working groups that have been really successful in the development of the strategy. Then we've got regional collaboration about bringing in the local authorities together and more detailed engagement with the local authorities for them to help develop their own strategies. And then we've got targeted engagement. So there's a few organisations that have been targeted. So we've had really good engagement with the distribution network operators, and we plan to maintain that, as well as further engagement with the public and private fleet operators as part of developing the fleet forecasts, also with National Highways, OZEV and the Energy Saving Trust. And then updating, adapting, progressing is about updating the strategy and action plan and making sure it's as up to date as possible given the rapidly changing market, actually developing the EV infrastructure demands for vehicle fleets, and updating the EVCI Locate app, which Danny mentioned, and exploring any kind of possibility of any centralised data. And I think we're at questions, comments.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Where do we go? Joy.
Is to use it as an example. How can you help supporters where we have areas that are lacking in energy infrastructure? So I could highlight 2 of them in my own area, which we noticed we went back to that first map. The Chichester area was either amber or red. So I'm trying to have one large depot there, and I'd like to put an electric fleet in, but apparently I can't get any energy to the site. So that's rather sort of put a kibosh on me buying an electric fleet for there. But how can you support us? Because it's an affluent area. We've got high numbers of electric vehicles going into there. It's going to stymie it if we don't have the power. So I don't know what influence you can bring to bear there. And the other area is actually towards Burgess Hill, Haywards Heath, again in my patch, where we have our other depot, which I would like to put electric fleet in. I think we're getting over that. But there is an awful lot of development with distribution centres and also science parks, etc., going in, huge amount of housing. So that's a real concern. Because again, it's a fairly affluent area with quite a high take-up of EV. So I suppose my comments really are, how can the energy companies keep up with the demand?
Very good question. Is it one that you want to
I can come back on it, yeah, I can try. I think the DNOs, obviously there's 2 across the southeast, they are aware of the challenges that they are facing, and they are trying to be as proactive as they can be. I think it is difficult for them because obviously there's more and more developments coming online, and these are typically high energy developments, and therefore it's going to be a one-way journey. I would say that at any site, there's always an answer, but obviously it comes at a significant cost. I'm sure if you've done the investigation into a certain depot that's at the limit of the grid, then the cost suddenly goes from 5 figures to 6 or 7 figures, and that is the issue really. I think that we're working with a lot of local authorities, we're working with combined authorities, and we're working with government departments to look at the same kind of thing you're asking really. And at the moment, it's a choice between, do we go with the strategic best answer and it costs us a 10 times envelope, or do we make some savvy choices? And like you say, you've got a couple of depots in mind. Actually, you pick the one that you think actually it's more feasible to deliver, and actually you might have to restructure some of the depots and deliver services from different depots. But if we all understand the local authority kind of complications and funding difficulties, that sometimes we have to be practical with those kind of things. In an ideal world, we'd love to go out and put charge points in all the perfectly strategic places, but in hindsight and in knowing what we know, it's not practical, not feasible. So we do the best we can, and that's why we're building a lot of these models, and we're trying to understand deliverability comes into it a lot, which I guess is the answer to your question, and that's why it's really important that we work with the DNOs really closely to understand what their pipelines look like, and if there are reinforcements coming to the grid in certain areas, then we need to keep that collaboration going to understand that. And that's why it was really important with the working groups, because the DNOs were on the groups, they were talking, they were open, they were understanding kind of what we were looking at, and we were kind of spotlight conversations around a few things. And I think that's why the importance needs to kind of carry on around those collaborations, because like you said, it can be a blocker, a real big blocker if we don't do it. So definitely something worth continuing.
So whilst the 16 transport bodies working together have more power, reality, how much of it is lack of infrastructure versus the ability to adapt the infrastructure, if that makes sense? Because quite clearly there are places where this would be achievable, not where you want them, and there are places where you want them which are not achievable. I just wonder how that works.
Yeah, I don't often make this comparison, but we think about the petrol station model at the moment. The petrol stations are not always in the perfect places that we need them, but we make do because we need to travel and charge, and it means that we have to change our habits a little bit in terms of we're not going to be in that situation where we can drive to a certain place and fuel up our vehicle in 2-3 minutes. It's going to take a little bit more planning. And as an EV driver, I can say it does take a bit more planning, and sometimes you end up sweating a bit on the journey because you're pretty close to the mileage. But I think it's the world we live in, and it's the constraints we operate within, and I can't give you a magic answer, I'm afraid. It's just going to be, it's the future we're going to have to live in. The government have made the commitments now, and the positive is we are seeing funding come from government and from DFT and from other funds that are giving us opportunities to kind of put the right things in the right place where we can, and the grid will also need to play a role in that, which we think will increase going forward.
As I come to Elaine, I just remind that this wasn't just TFSE, it was collectively across the piece that we're joining up. So hopefully, I'm sure the messages will be going back. Elaine.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you very much for your presentation. It's really important that we're, thinking about all of this. We're quite ahead of the game in Brighton and Hove. We've, got quite good infrastructure. Obviously, it can always be improved, but the more infrastructure we have, we've noticed a lot more people driving electric cars where we are. So yeah, it's really important. So my question is I don't know if it is quite your area, but I'll ask you anyway. Is the positioning of on-street points, because sometimes you have that rub between needing the points, but needing to keep pavements clear because of them being narrow. I wonder if that's something that you're considering or putting forward good practice on, because that's really important as well.
Yeah, so is obviously our bag. We're in a unique position as a company that we do everything from the strategy feasibility stuff all the way through to delivering at the end and putting spades in the ground and installing and operating. So we've got some real lessons learned from what we've done in other areas. So we, on the back of a few of the meetings recently with kind of the local authority officers, we shared some best practice examples of actually these are the options you've got on street, and it's not just put it on a curbside. There are lots of different ways of doing it. You might lose a parking space here or there. You might be able to use a lamp post charging if you're on the roadside rather than the property side. There are options. There are innovations coming to the market as well. That we provide examples to our local authorities that can look into new things, overhanging. But again, I can't make a political decision effectively, because we've seen in some areas where there's been kind of trips or DDA compliance issues and accessibility compliance issues, and that has made local authorities make kind of significant choices, whether it's a knee-jerk reaction to a claim, for example, or whether it's actually we need to back something and go with it. And some of the other authorities we're working with have made quite bold choices and have stuck with them. So York City Council, for example, have said they're not doing any on-street charge points, nothing. They will put stuff in at like community hubs instead in the community, so people can still charge at home, but they might have to walk 2 or 3 minutes to their local one. I imagine on like a terrace street, for example, or something like that. So there's pros and cons to each option. Like I said, we provide all the information to the officers at local authorities, and we're happy to provide evidence and guidance, but there's no one-size-fits-all answer at the moment. As you sure you know,
there's a sort of set of good practice. You're working towards that, but it's quite hard.
Yeah, I think there was 7 options that we sent out. I think that we thought were feasible, and it depends on a case-by-case basis. But the idea we would say was use the tool, find the right location, roughly geographically, and then actually look at what's right for that location specifically. Because it depends on pavement width. It depends on how busy the road is. Depends on whether it's a thoroughfare, or whether it's a dead end, all that kind of stuff. But we can advise on all that, and we have been doing so.
Thank you.
Thank you. I come to Vince and I come to Gary. Vince.
Yeah. Thanks, Keith. Just 2 points from me. One that is a genuine thing I don't know. Where does the governance for this sit? Because what I'm listening is multiple authorities at local level, national level, government departments. Is there any governance or regulation in place for this, or is it too new and it's just a bit of a... It sounds like a bit of a Wild West. in terms of establishing the charging points. That's one point. So if I say the second one, you can probably take them together. The other thing that, in just listening to this, it sounds like there's a real dilemma and trade-off between land use and EV charging here, because places which are best fit for low carbon economies are more dense urban areas, which are densely populated, so you can have a whole range of services so you don't need to travel. And they're the least fit for EV charging because you haven't got the road frontage for the cars. I mean, Brighton may be a sort of example of that, where there's many more residents than there are cars. So it seems to me there's a real trade-off to happen between carbon zero in terms of land usage and EV cars, because if we extend that into public transport, the use of EV, maybe people think, well, we don't need to use public transport anymore, but it increases the call on land usage. So I think at some stage, so my two questions really is, one, what's the governance around it? And two, how are we thinking about this in terms of total land use versus other carbon offsets?
Yeah, so first question, in terms of standards of infrastructure and kind of installations, there are the recent PAS 1899 kind of guidance was around accessibility standards, and we've seen a few stories in the news where people have installed things and it's just not been DDA compliant, and therefore it's been a massive issue for them. So there is standards in terms of like that, but in terms of responsibility and kind of who does what where, there isn't. It's, at the moment, it's very much treated like it's your local street furniture, whether it's a traffic light or a street lamp or something like that. So locally, a lot of them are being done, but the difficulty is a lot of these are off highway, and therefore commercial operators can put them in anywhere they want, at any standards, and they're at the will of the public, really. So the answer to your first question is it's not really governed from that point. OZEV are doing quite a lot, Energy Saving Trust are doing quite a lot, but they're more kind of in advisory kind of roles rather than regulatory, I think. The second question, I think we should probably preface before we started that this is in the transport hierarchy. We're not proposing that, I don't think anyone's proposing that electric vehicles will take over bus trips and active travel trips, and absolutely not. We want to make sure we're prioritising the right way. But for the people that cannot switch out or will not switch out of their cars, and this is the last step, really. So in terms of land use and amenities, and we're trying to make sure that this ties in with what's already there. We're trying to use existing car parking spaces where possible, whether it's a library or a health centre or a school, or and we're looking at that kind of thing. But in terms of land use, we're trying not to conflict with anything. We're definitely not recommending anything like that. We're not recommending land grabs or any of that kind of stuff. But I think your point, you're acknowledging some of the commercial operators that probably almost definitely are kind of maybe sacrificing some of what we would deem as prioritised spaces for this kind of stuff. So this is why it's important for the region and all the local authorities to make sure they're over this and make sure we're making advice where we can. And there's an improved role to have a view on this kind of stuff, whether it's through planning applications or whether it's through kind of guidance committees. And we are seeing people that are starting to play the system a little bit more. So we need to make sure that we're set up in a way that we can make sure that we're saying yes to good examples and call out the bad examples, and maybe put stoppers in where we need to, and planning applications come in. Sorry, long-winded response.
Just worth adding, Vince, I think the approach over the last few years has been let 1,000 flowers bloom and, choose which one comes out best. And I don't think it is the right approach for this. What we are doing here is trying to give our local transport authorities and, through the work that we're doing with the SIP, a bit of regional emphasis on where you can, where you can't. It's also worth adding that Transport for the North have done quite a lot on EV. And I know that, frankly, their funding letter talks about them sharing that with other STBs. I think that's really helpful because it allows us to, rather than duplicate, is pool our 7 STB resources together to get best bang for our buck. So I think historically it's been a bit of a challenge. This is inevitably somewhere we have to go. I mean, the points about modal shift I think are important. So EV vehicles will just be a part of a range of transport choices, and we don't want to dissuade people from bus or active travel and rail and other bits and bobs. But inevitably there is a call for this, and we want to make sure we're ready. And I think with the work we're doing here, and plus what TfN have produced, it'll put us in a stronger place. And I think DfT and ministers are keen to see that happen as well.
guess so I'm expressing is that come 2030, when sale of other, combustible fuels banned, the demand from constituents, from others to have access to this is going to go up rapidly. I mean, I'm just buying a new car. I couldn't buy an EV one because I can't charge it on my property. And I think that same thing goes around for many, many people who have made smart choices for carbon, but it won't be smart for EV. And I think there is a dilemma that I don't think we fully appreciate the level of demand that people are going to have in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
I think that's right. At the same time, we've got to make sure in those urban areas that you've just described, we've got really fantastic public transport offer. So that actually negates the need for people to have in London, why would you want anything else than really good quality public transport? And the department's ambition is that they see that type of model rolled out into other urban areas. The other challenge, of course, is making sure, and as our region we know there's a lot of rural areas, we've got to make sure that rural communities aren't left behind in this sort of race to EV. And so we need a model that works for both.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Most interesting. Have you done any work looking at the demographics of the owner? I have a concern that a lot of EV buyers, first-time buyers, are probably in the 40%, as you say in your report, that have off-street parking and can afford to charge them. When I caught the train up here today, I parked in the car park at the station, which we'd have installed, I think, 8 EV charging. 2 of them were being used because people who currently have EVs have off-street parking, so they do it at home. As those cars move down to the 2nd, 3rd and 4th owners, those sort of owners are not going to have as much off-street parking. And I'm a bit concerned that we're going to get caught with the fact if we look at our current public usage or of EV chargers or usage at supermarkets, etc., it's relatively low. Every time I drive past, it's 75% empty. But that's probably going to explode in a couple of years' time as those vehicles move down the demographic line. So have you done any work to say this is what we predict is things going to happen to the demand of EV charges?
Yes, so as we mentioned earlier, these 3 kind of use cases, we've looked at these 3 distinct parts, and on top of that then we've overlaid a element of affordability, and kind of we know that there's early adopters that take it sooner, that pay a premium for the new technology and kind of adopt that. We've done a lot of work in terms of second-hand market prices and how that when they will start to become affordable, and I guess most importantly when it becomes cost parity, when it actually makes logical sense. It's the same price as a petrol diesel, so if you've got access to charge infrastructure, it's logical because it's cheaper to run. So that's built into the forecast we've done for the region. I think it is what it is. It's an assumption based on the information we know at the moment, and it's quite robust and it's been tested quite heavily. And so we've done low, medium, and high ranges. So we've got that kind of bookend approach. We don't know what's going to happen with battery technology in the future, for example. Will the batteries be a lot bigger? Will they be faster charging? And that could impact a lot of these things in terms of whether you need a faster charger or actually, if a full charge at the moment for a 60 kilowatt battery on a 50 kilowatt charger is just over an hour, logically. But in the future, if battery size is double, then that's suddenly a 2.5 hour charge. So the chargers need to keep pace with that. So it's an ever-changing market, and we've done a piece in the report, in the strategy you've got eyes on in terms of what the future might be. It's almost looking into this kind of mystic meg approach of what might the future contain, and it's the best we've got at the moment. We can look at trends, we can look at what's coming out of China and some of the other areas where the innovation is kind of ahead of the curve, but we don't know which is going to be this adopted approach yet. So does that answer your question? Sorry.
Thank you.
John, I know you've got to go soon, so thank you for.
That's okay. So just very quickly, just to say in line with what Rupert said, really, it's great to have this kind of strategic debate at regional level. This is a huge priority for the DfT, and we're on a kind of really big journey of change here. And I think it's great to see it feature so strongly in the investment plan. And just continue working together on it, I think, and really great to see what's coming out of it and joining up with the work of TfN and the other STBs. And then just say I'm afraid I've got to go because I've got something to deal with back at the branch. But thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming, John. If we go to Matthew now, that would be good.
Thank you. Yes, just 3 points for me. First, towards the timescales, because you've kind of left it very open as next financial year. The reason I raise that is Surrey and West Sussex are both fairly advanced with contracts with Connected Curb to deliver 10,000 charge points in each county. So that's the first point. Second point is, if we're delivering 10,000 charge points in each county, your figures look very low, as you're looking for roughly about 30,000 for the whole of the South East. So it's just something that bear in mind. And then the third point, when you were particularly talking about fleet management, is we haven't had any discussion around hydrogen, particularly as bus operators and HGV fleets are all looking at hydrogen rather than electric. So it's something that are we just assuming they're going to go into the normal petrol forecourts and then sort themselves out, or are we actually thinking, no, we will need to think about the distribution across the South East?
I'm sure we need to. I'm not sure it's part of this study in as much as this is specifically around the EVs, but have we done any work, or do we intend to do any work on hydrogen?
I think there have been a number of forays by bus operators and haulage operators. Predominantly it's the expense of getting the vehicle that can deal with hydrogen, and then also how do you refuel it. And again, I think this is relatively early days. There is a bit of uncertainty around hydrogen still. And then also the aspects around the type of hydrogen. There are, for example, on the South Coast, there is I can't remember the name of it, it's a hydrogen project. That's it. That is exploring opportunities. But ultimately, I think there's going to be a commercial decision made by operators around the tipping point at which they enter into a sort of hydrogen.
So
There are some examples. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. We start needing to consider that now, rather than, well, Netherlands or Saudi Arabia with companies with the hydrogen impact. So that's why we need to start to that. But I do think that the figures are still low, and we might need to look at the timescales.
Do you want to comment on your figures?
I think I'll leave Ben to answer the first question in a second. But the second point around the charge point numbers, and I think this is the minimum we've put in. I think absolutely this is to make sure that people can service the vehicles and can get from A to B. In an ideal world, we want more than that, so we can absolutely, not have to wait when we pull up at the charge point. And if there's a couple that are broken, we want to make sure there's obviously a bigger contingency. So I completely take your point. And if we were starting from the approach of what we would like to see on the network, obviously the numbers would be much higher. So yeah, it's not surprising that your numbers are bigger, and obviously in a contract like that. In terms of the hydrogen piece, we also do a lot of work around hydrogen. It was not specifically in this piece of work, but completely take your point. I think maybe the pertinent point around hydrogen at the moment is I think there's only 11 hydrogen refueling stations in the UK at the moment, so it's not currently feasible for hauliers to be using as they're travelling around the country unless they've got one at their depot and therefore they can make it work. The cost of hydrogen vehicles is currently not commercially viable for most commercial operators, I think, working with a lot of them at the moment, and we are doing a lot of work to explore that. It won't be long till it comes online, absolutely take your point, and I think some are starting to trial it, but those trials are almost always underpinned by grant funding that's kind of making the business case stack up. So definitely one to watch in the future, but it was excluded from this, I'm afraid. Do you want to answer about timescales?
I'll take the one on timescales. No, so this kind of initial piece of work in terms of the strategy development, that's coming to an end now, but we're raring to go with kind of the second phase of work. So as was mentioned in the presentation, we're finalising the fleet forecasting methodology at the moment. The forecasting demand for that work we've kind of, in terms of timescales, put in towards the summer. Following on from today, we'll look to kind of get the next meeting of the EV forum in place for kind of June time, but in kind of before then, the EVCI Locate tool will be rolled out to local officers within local transport authorities across the area over hopefully the next 4 weeks or so. So Arcadis are going through the process of finalising some of the details in there, and then we'll look to kind of train up officers from local transport authorities and get them on board with using the tool.
It's about sharing the information we do have, even though there's a lot more to gain. Jeff. And welcome.
Well, first of all, apologies everybody, but I've just sat for 2 hours on a train that didn't go anywhere at the airport junction on the main GWR line. So I can't comment totally on what's gone before, but just a general thought was that from what I've seen, what has been done and what is being done is very impressive. But I think we all have to remember that opportunities for improvements be it on road, rail, bus, EV or whatever, often appear quite suddenly. I think the gentleman from highways area. Hello, Richard. Sorry, I didn't recognise you. But I think experience in the past has shown that you need to have a range of projects almost ready to go. So whatever avenue government choose, you have something that would answer that issue.
Yep.
That might not be the ones we would like if we had a vote, but then he who has the purse controls where it goes. And that was all I wanted to make as a general point. Thank you, Keith.
And I think you're absolutely right, which is why we do need to have another eye on what else there is that's going on. But we've got to start somewhere. And I think, again, when we see what we've got a really good starting block. In answer to Matthew's point about we're just going to send them all to Surrey and West Sussex to charge. Is there anything more you wish to add?
Not a huge amount more for me. I'll just go to kind of the last slide on this section, but also just give you the opportunity to read over the recommendations on the slide there. I just want to take the moment to say a big thank you to Kim, Danny from Arcadis and the rest of the project team for the work that they've carried out over the last 6 months. The stakeholder engagement that we've had to date has been, I think it's gone way above my expectations in terms of our EV forum that we have running. As Kim and Danny have said, that's a there's various stakeholders from across the region, but we've got about 100 active members on that forum, and everybody seems to be pulling in the same direction at the moment, which is really great news from our perspective.
Ben, thank you very much. And thank you, our colleagues from Arcadia. Joy.
Really quick one, just to say, by the way, I really enjoyed reading the report. It was fascinating, actually. It's sad, isn't it, that I enjoyed it, but I did. Can I just ask one thing, though, on page 383, which is about the recommended ratio of BEV, which is 10:1, it says. Is that necessarily right for what I would call more rural areas, where there's a lot more private driveways? Is that more sort of related to urban areas, possibly?
Yeah, definitely. This is not our recommendation. This is not a government recommendation. This is the Institute of Environmental Agency, IEA. So they've made this as a ballpark. It's a bit of a pie in the sky figure. They've not really provided much evidence. Their view is that this would give people confidence to use EVs a bit more. I think we would be much more comfortable with the evidence-led approach we've done. The numbers we've come up with gives us a comfortable range, and we have, if you've read the report, you've seen the analysis we've gone into in terms of actually we've looked at the details from the South East Transport Regional Model to understand actually people's trip usage, how far people drive away from home. Therefore, that gives us a more accurate look at. Theirs is very much based on a number. So I imagine that actually the golden number, probably golden ratio, whatever you want to call it, is probably nearer to 14, 15 for most urban areas, which you're not far away from. I think 10 is very much, I don't know, I think it was done with like an Amsterdam model in mind kind of thing, where it's, a bit more intensive use. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, and thank you very much. We have the recommendations on the screen. Are we happy to agree? Thank you very much indeed. So we now come to agenda item 10, which is Centre of Excellence, and Emily is going to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just wait for my colleagues to quickly come and join me. So I'm joined today by Kate Fairhall, who is the project manager at Arup, and also by John Collins, who is the associate director also at Arup, who have been supporting TFSE with this project. So we did commission Arup back in January this year to help us with the development of a regional centre of excellence. So we have worked with them also on the local capability and also on previous projects as well. So they do have the really good intellectual property to be able to deliver on this, which we were originally awarded some funding back in October 2021, which was for the local capability piece, which is when we first awarded them the commission. So we've taken you through the presentation today, which will be setting out the project and the definition, and also we'll be providing some case studies as well to show some best practice. And then also looking at the key principles for the roadmap, and the roadmap is Appendix 1 as part of your board pack. And then also looking at the benefits and outcomes. So what are the risks if we don't deliver on this project? And then also just some of the conclusions as well and the next steps.
Sorry, Emily, we do have people getting coffee. Should we adjourn for a couple of seconds while they do that? Because I don't really want to spoil your
no problem
delivery of your. So I know. Well, it wasn't you, Jeff. Turn up late and disrupt the meeting. I think we're all right. Should we go for it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So just to set out some of the background for this piece, so it's not something that TFSC have just come up with by ourselves. It has been supported by previous works that we have done, but basically it's set about by the Levelling Up white paper that was published in February 2022. And so that set out for levelling up across the region, and so whether that was by sharing knowledge, and we felt it could be delivered by our Centre of Excellence. And so in turn, the DFT have tasked all 7 subnational transport bodies with creating their own Centre of Excellence. And so we have been tasked with doing this, and what we're also doing is Rupert is acting as chair for a 7 STB meeting where we're checking in on progress. As part of this, they have set out with 4 topics of interest that they would like to see us develop on and uplift throughout the region. So those are shared on screen. So it's updating local transport plans as part of the guidance that's coming out soon, providing support and quantifying carbon reductions, developing effective business cases, and ensuring each LTA delivers and maintains a pipeline of future schemes. And so all of those work streams will be able to funnel into this and make sure that all 4 of those objectives are being adhered to. I think it's also just important to point out what we mentioned earlier on around the local capability piece. So that really did support the fact for a Centre of Excellence, where we had already awarded £280,000 to 5 local authorities to uplift their skills in things such as strategic optioneering, carbon reduction, and also on communications. Another part as well is the roles and responsibilities piece that TFSC worked on in October 2021. That did set out the need and desire for some resource to be able to share knowledge throughout the region. And so all of these aspects are really just funneling into the Centre of Excellence that we're looking to develop. For the project overview, we have held some workshops to date. So we held an internal workshop with TFSC team to make sure that we were all aligned, and also to make sure that we align with the DFT priorities. Additionally to that, we've also met with all 16 local transport authorities, and we did that as a workshop. So we tried to ascertain what levels of support they would need and what involvement they would like, because we really want this to be co-designed with the region. Part of the key activities have also looked at reviewing the existing tools, so Project View and what forums we already have and how that is affecting our local transport authorities and their knowledge. And also trying to create that plausible roadmap. So it's all very well and good if we were to say we can deliver on all of these things, but it needs to be feasible. So how much resource are we asking for the local transport authorities if we are doing that knowledge share aspect? Then finally, we also did present the roadmap, to the DFT on the 7th of March. They were really pleased with the outcomes, and so we are just waiting to see if we are able to release the rest of the funding. So we did have 300,000 set aside for 22-23. At the moment, we've released 40,000 of it. So that presentation was just to unlock the rest of that funding. And so I'll be handing over to my colleagues, Kate and John now, and they'll be presenting to you the roadmap itself for the Centre of Excellence and the case studies to date. So thank you to Kate.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily, and good afternoon. So firstly, what do we mean by a Centre of Excellence? There are a range of definitions and there are some common principles. So firstly, it's regional, so serving a defined region or area, but it's important to note that it should also align to national policy. Next is centre, so it can be a physical or virtual place and or platform supported by a group of people. And lastly, the word excellence, so this place and these people deliver excellence together. So we have completed research into different centres of excellence, and here is a list. But what I'll do is go through some of those in further details on the next slide. So 3 of the examples. So firstly, the Urban Learning Centre has recently been created. It's for the mayors of economic growth and jointly funded by the UN and EU. It is designed to reimagine urban and local spaces for positive transformational change and future readiness. It has been built in collaboration with many different stakeholders and showcases projects, has knowledge libraries and a digital platform called SparkBlue. The next is the UK Rail Research and Innovation Network, and it was set up to create collaboration between academia and industry through the creation of 3 centres of excellence. It aimed to fill capability gaps in the UK to enable step change in innovation and accelerate new product development. It's hosted by a number of different universities across the UK, and it's a really good example of how a centre of excellence can include physical presence, so people gathering together physically in a location. It was developed by the University of Birmingham leading the way, who led a consortium of universities partnered with the supply chain and rail industry clients to develop proposals, and funding was provided by the UK government and leading industrial partners. Last but not least is the Peru Playbook. There has been a government-to-government arrangement between the Peru and UK governments to develop infrastructure. To support this, there's been developed a playbook that sets out how knowledge could be transferred based upon best practice theory and also practical experience. Includes many different elements, including a process for knowledge transfer, developing baseline capability assessments, creating communities of practice, partnering with academia to develop and deliver courses, including a digital solution as well, so an online learning platform called Moodle, expertise finding, knowledge base, lessons learned and forums, and monitoring and evaluation for reporting, so lots of different components. So that's just to give you a flavour of some case study examples around best practice centres of excellence. Next. So through this research, we have identified common principles to creating an effective centre of excellence. Firstly, a centre of excellence has many parallels with knowledge transfer and learning. This diagram shows a learning development model. So where 70% of time is learning from experience, so on the job, 20% is learning from others, so maybe shadowing, following others, and then 10% via formal learning. So these are some useful principles to consider when developing a centre of excellence, that the centre of excellence should reflect all of these different learning types and ways of learning. Then the other diagram on the right shows a framework that we've developed based upon the research, showing the different components to consider for a centre of excellence. So for example, what is the purpose in the middle, and then also the format and how it is managed. So this structure has provided the basis for the foundation of the roadmap for the Centre of Excellence, which we'll take you through. So from this research as well, we've helped to identify some common principles from the best practice case studies. So I'll go through these in turn. So firstly, how to develop the Centre of Excellence. So one principle is it should have a co-designed approach. So with fully integrated leadership and development teams. Next, it should set out clear ownership and responsibilities of roles. It should include also a diagnostic of needs to help with prioritisation, and throughout the process, make sure those needs are referred to and updated. There should be a delivery partner so that there's shared ownership and collaboration. And another principle we found is that the digital Centre of Excellence should be set up as quickly as possible, so the platform, so get that set up quickly for success. Then what should it focus on? So it should focus on the development of peer networks, also ensure that any content is searchable. It should help members develop skills, so this could be via strategic meetings or coaching, and also there should be a strong collaboration between academia and industry. And lastly, how it should be managed. It should support itself, so there should be effective collaboration between members, effective knowledge sharing, and a key principle is make it easy to use. It should also enable users to highlight what they want on a continual basis. So I mentioned about capturing needs, but needs should be captured on a continual basis, and there should be an opportunity for members to provide feedback, so it's useful. It should also be accessible to all that need to use it. And there should be legacy discussions upfront about what should happen to the Centre of Excellence in the long term, so not just short-term thinking. So thank you. I'll now hand over to John.
Thanks, Kate. Our research has shown there are 6 benefits, particularly for the LTA community and for TFSC, a Centre of Excellence can deliver. It can help build capacity and capability. This is particularly important in areas that are such as emerging technologies or ways of doing things where there aren't that many people who can provide assistance. It's a way of promoting better communication. Having a centre of excellence creates those communication channels between LTAs and TFSE and between each other. We already have some experience of a similar model which is being used in the Bus Back Better support programme. We're already seeing the benefits of improved communication through what is quite a short but effective centre of excellence style approach. It needs to be bespoke to the TFSE area. For me, I think the governance arrangement in the TFSE area is very diverse if you compare it to, say, the north of England or the West Country. And I think that's why we need to find an approach that works well for the Isle of Wight, works well for the Berkshire authorities, works well for large 2 or 3 tier authorities as well. It can be a way of providing practical advice and support. So having that community of what we call excellent people with excellent skills can be used to provide support on particular topic issues. I could see this being deployed particularly where there are issues that cut across institutional boundaries. Hopefully, and I think the experience that our cases have shown, having a centre of excellence leads to better decisions, better funding priorities and better business cases. So this will make it easier and more effective to deliver some of those 300 interventions in the SIP that has been agreed earlier this meeting. Finally, it provides economies of scale. That's what gives us the capacity and capability. So rather than have 16 authorities all attempting to do something on, say, hydrogen, a centre of excellence is a better model, a more efficient model, and probably a quicker model to get that experience and expertise into planning and into delivery. There are also benefits more wider than just the TFSE area, which the next slide covers, particularly in mind of our DfT colleagues who we've presented this to. It is a great mechanism for delivering national, regional and local transport policies and ensuring that they are coherent. It is a way of avoiding duplication of efforts. So while the TFSE area might be pursuing something, it's possible that this Centre of Excellence could also work alongside other STBs. In fact, other STBs are looking very closely at what we're doing. This is the first of what we hope will be a programme of Centres of Excellence across all of England. And that leads into the final point, which is to ensure that the lessons captured from the process we go through can be shared to other STBs. And this is a really powerful point in selling to DfT to give us the support to go forward. In consultation with LTAs through the workshops that Emily talked about, we've identified an approach for delivering a Centre of Excellence for the TFSE area. The sorts of themes and priorities that emerge from these discussions is that there is a willingness to have a hybrid model. There should be something virtual, a platform that can be accessed anytime, anywhere from a phone, but there also needs to be a physical presence. There needs to be a way of meeting in groups. There needs to be a way of having that more personal touch. It needs to be easy to access and use. It should start in a focused role. It should get quick wins easy. So choose a small-ish number of topics, do well there, and then expand rather than attempt to do too many things at once. It should capture the knowledge from the outstanding, I think, evidence base that informs the SIP and much of the technical programme that has gone into it over the last 5 years. And it should try and bring that into a single place. At the moment, it's a bit disparate, and that's a good platform for building on. LTAs will be engaged throughout the life of the Centre of Excellence. We'll talk a little bit about that in governance, and therefore, because of that dialogue, it should reflect the needs of different LTAs to deal with different types of governance arrangements, scales, needs, and so on. The funding model is pretty much agreed for the next 2 to 3 years, but a longer term, more sustainable funding approach will also need to be considered. So if we go back to that diagram we saw earlier of the cycle, those were the 8 or 9 key principles to consider in designing and delivering a Centre of Excellence. We have prepared a roadmap which shows what activities will take place over the next 3 financial years, some indication of the scale of finance that would be involved, and we have presented this to DfT. The first, in sitting in the centre of that diagram we saw, understanding the purpose. That is clearly where we start, and that's what a lot of this discussion is today. The format, which is really about the channels through which the Centre of Excellence will deliver its benefits, is around whether it will be virtual, physical, or both, and I think the feeling is probably both. The components are the key activities that a Centre of Excellence would be expected to deliver. That That can include preparing a library of resources, delivering training courses, delivering one-to-one advice, potentially secondments, a procurement channel. So those are the sorts of functions that we're talking about. The audience is LTAs, might be expanded to LPAs as well, but keeping it very much in local government. The content, this is a more interesting bit, is the topics that the Centre of Excellence would consider. We've already talked about the 4 at the beginning, things like carbon calculator. That can be, of course, refined and honed as we go through the life cycle of the Centre of Excellence, so we can focus on things that are important. And we've heard some interesting topics today, such as decarbonisation, electric vehicles, and hydrogen. Those are the sorts of topics that the Centre of Excellence could provide support on. Okay, development is about understanding where there are gaps in capability and using a Centre of Excellence to fill them. That could be through procuring additional advice, or it could be through developing the skills of officers and councillors as well. Final slide on this. It's important that the management and governance of the Centre of Excellence is clear and accessible. There will be a feedback loop that ensures that we are monitoring whether it is doing what it is expected to do, and then we can tailor and plan future years' activities based on that feedback. I've mentioned that the funding will need to be discussed towards the end of the cycle. And finally, there will be a monitoring and evaluation mechanism which will be used to understand the success of the outputs and the outcomes that this body is delivering. In conclusion, there is a lot of support for this. It is seen as an important mechanism for delivering the strategic investment plan. It's important to national government. It has asked STBs to look at this model and to develop it. I think it's a great thing that TFSE is one of the first to do this, and I think we've seen from great case studies about how it can be made to work well. It should be noted that these things, these groups can be very wide and different in size and function, but many have similar characteristics. Those are the things that we've covered today, and those are the things that we are seeking your support to deliver over the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Joy.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so a few questions. I was trying to it would be quite nice if I had a schematic to understand how it's going to sit within TFSE, I suppose, and the staff that you currently have. I suppose I would have considered them experts already, yeah. Listen, in principle, I don't have an issue with it. I just want some refinement around it. I suppose one of the questions I have will be around the recruitment, because I think in the papers, or at some point in the papers, I just tried to find out which page, where it's referred to the fact there's real issues with these skill sets at the moment. And I suppose I'm rather selfishly thinking about, will you be recruiting from the local authority teams, and that will give us then an issue. So that was one point. But I suppose really importantly, is how will local authorities be able to access help, and who will decide who gets help at what time?
Thank you very much. So regarding the recruitment, so I have been recruited as a project manager specifically for the Centre of Excellence, so we'll be able to focus on delivering those needs and also managing the project itself. I think that whenever we're talking about resourcing LTAs, we're not trying to take away any of that responsibility from them. We will be doing a roles and responsibilities piece again. We did recruit for Sarah's team, which is the analysis and appraisal, which is to help deliver with the strategic investment plan. So we're already trying to deliver on those areas that we've spotted gaps. But the second round of the roles and responsibilities will make sure that we're still fit for purpose, and also just do an analysis of the LTAs as well to see if we can offer anything to them. So not trying to take anything away from them, but just trying to enhance their capacity and capability. And then also just on the final point that you raised, we will be trying to make it as accessible as possible. So we are working to co-design it with them. I think in the first instance, it will have a very virtual focus. So being an internet base with a suite of documents where they can use Project View or any other of the tools that we're planning to put on there, such as the post-opening project evaluation, which is what Sarah's developing as part of the SIP. So that will sit on there. So it's just a place that everybody can access these tools and try and make it really usable, because at the end of the day, we want it to be used, we want it to sustain support, so it's not just a one-hit wonder. And so I think that by doing that, if we gain support by the virtual access and then there is a need for the physical access, then that will be planned out as well. And then just regarding your bit around the prioritisation, we're looking to work with all of the local authorities on the prioritisation. If there is a top 10 list of schemes that the DFT want us to work on, then we'll be working with those local authorities to deliver on them. But it's mainly around those 4 key topic areas that the DFT are targeting us with. So if there is a particular focus that is need for support on quantifiable carbon reduction, then that will draw the most attention.
Although it's great to say, I'm sorry, I should start. This sounds very positive.
Hang on a minute.
I set up a number of centres of excellence, which is why I'm going to dive into this one. What's incredibly important is to get clear what the outcomes you're trying to achieve are from the centre of excellence. It's good to say that you will pick a few bits of low-hanging fruit and address them and get some track record. But identifying what those small number of small projects is or are is only possible if you know what your overall outcomes are. I think very, very important is also the structure, the governance of the whole thing. I think it's great that Joy said that the recommended TFC has already been a centre of excellence. That's a good starting point. But to progress and form this RCOE, which sits within TFSC, for it to really thrive, then that accountability to the RTAs has got to remain, and it's got to be seen as the point of first call for certain specific things, which then gets me on to the other point I wanted to kind of lodge, and that is, please can you make sure that you identify who your partners are, and that might be things like the Transport Technology Forum, which already is trying to address levelling up what goes across the local authorities, and I happen to know that Arab actually ran the Secretariat for the TTF for a while, so you know that. But there are other organisations that will be able to act as partners in crime, experts within our little community, like the Advanced Propulsion Centre on low carbon fuel and propulsion systems. We mustn't try and do stuff that others will be doing.
No.
It's obvious, but I will keep it on the record.
I think that, sorry, did you want to come back and then I'll...
Absolutely fine, Councillor Glazer, Karen.
I mean, I think that's really good advice, but there are 2 things I'd say. First and foremost, I agree. I think we are noted for bringing together a lot of expertise and bringing it all into one place. And I think that is what we've got to build on then. I mean, I understand you've got to have goals and outcomes that you want to achieve, but what you can't forget is why we're here. It's here because 16 transport authorities want to use their bulk and capability to work together to achieve the best that's available. So, and I'm sure that won't ever be forgotten, but I just needed to say it. Emily.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo those sentiments, really. So whenever we did the LTA workshop, we asked them what sort of capability and capacity they already have to be able to help co-design this. And so there was a lot of support for that. So that was really good because while we don't want to make it resource intensive for the LTAs, we are aware that we will need their support throughout this. And then also their need for academics as well. So there was a real keen aspect for the Centre of Excellence to have that access to the academics. So whenever we come to doing the next step, which is writing the brief for the full procurement for the Centre of Excellence platform, we will be looking at how we can include academics and their resource on that as well. And I think also just important to mention that the STB meeting that we have quarterly, which I mentioned earlier, that Rupert chairs, it gives us real access into what the other 7 STBs are working on. So, for example, if Transport for the North, who have been given this extra funding for the analytical framework, how can we use that knowledge and information so that we're not duplicating anything, so that we are being wise with our funding and so that we are also not duplicating or replicating anything, and doing that knowledge share not only between the LTAs but also between all of the STBs as well.
Thank you. Vince.
Keith, just one small point. when I read in the paper, DfT have tasked all STBs with creating centres of excellence, I sort of went, Something that's created as a central drive isn't always successful. And I guess building on points before, are you really clear who the customers are going to be in this? You've had the workshops with the LTAs. Is there going to be an ongoing engagement with them as customers to make sure they're getting what they need? Because it has to be used and useful to make, get the benefits from the money. So is there a process that really focuses in on what the customer needs for the LTAs are?
Yes, so we'll be continuing the steering group with the working group, with the LTAs. So out of that workshop, we did ask all of them, who do you think the audience should be? Do you think that your local planning authorities, and also do you think that district and boroughs and all sorts of wide range of stakeholders should be involved in this? Should the Network Rail partners be able to access this as well, or should it just be that they actually input into it as opposed to having access? So it is something that we are considering and also maintaining. I think that the point that John mentioned earlier around having that small focus, so trying to deliver on those 4 topic areas that the DfT have tasked us, and then looking to see how that's benefited the LTAs, and then see how we can grow out from there. If it's a really useful resource and it's going to benefit our district and borough colleagues as well, then I would really welcome it trying to grow, but it's just trying to make sure it sustains itself. So in the interim, yes, it will just be the LTAs, but we will be maintaining that level of engagement and also the good news stories. And then if there is a drive for the district and boroughs to want to use it, then we'll try and then see how we can change the approach for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Rupert.
Vince's point, normally I'd share your nervousness, but I think that the fact that the DfT have tasked some national transport bodies for this, there's a line in the Levelling Up white paper about centres of excellence. I think it's really good news, because the challenges that local transport authorities face is, how do you develop a pipeline? How do you get all the stuff that you want to do to a place where you've got sound business cases that are saying, this is value for money, it's got a good strategic economic case. And across the 16 local transport authorities, our resources are mixed and our skills and expertise is mixed. And the fact that the department recognises that the skills associated with bringing transport schemes forward are challenging to find is a positive thing. So that's the way in which I'm looking at it. It's a recognition that we need to do all we can to get the pipeline moving, and this is a mechanism by which we can do it.
For me, I just want to make sure that we're focused on the customers and get the benefits. In the end, that's what absolutely.
Thank you. Emily, Kate, John, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
So, sorry? We haven't yet. We ought to, I guess. Apologies. The recommendations are on the board. Are we happy to agree? Great. Thank you very much indeed. So we now come to technical call-off contract procurement. Rupert?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, this paper is effectively to develop a call-off contract. We need to streamline the process by which we buy in expertise to support to develop the programme. This proposal here is for a 2-year call-off contract, extendable by a further year. It's worth approximately £4 million over 2 years. Again, if it extends out to the 3 years, potentially £6 million. This is an evolving and significant programme of work that we have that will require specialist advice. And what this call-off contract aims to do is relieve the pressure on us and also relieve the pressure on the accountable bodies procurement teams if you're constantly having to go out and buy. What we'd want to do is establish through through the accountable bodies standing orders around procurement, a framework contract. So in accordance with the Constitution, which asks us to bring procurements like this here, I'm seeking delegated authority to commence this procurement. I would also advise board members that once we've gone through the procurement process, the decision to award a call-off contract will come back here for your decision based on officer recommendations.
I think the last sentence covers it all. Are we all happy to do that? Or any questions or comments? No? Agreed as printed? Thank you very much. So we then come to lead officer's report. Thank you, Rupert.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't tend to tend to dwell on this for fear of repeating what's in the paper. I'm happy to take any questions. But just one point I would, and it was remiss of me not to mention this at the point of the STIP, is to thank our partners, and particularly Steer in this instance, in helping get the SIP to a place it is and that you've agreed. But I'm very happy to take questions on the lead officers.
I'm sure on behalf of all of us, we would want to join with you thanking our partners for that work. Any other questions or comments? No? Thank you. Thorough report. So again, recommendations on the board. Thank you. So we now come to the technical programme update, and that's Mark, please.
Yes, just quickly, Chair. The purpose of the report is just to update members on progress on a number of areas of the technical work programme. On the slide, just on the second part of the slide as well, it just shows the areas of work that are covered off by this report. One area to note, item number or recommendation number 7 on the procurement of a regional active strategist, asking members to agree that the authority delegating authority to the lead officer in consultation with the chair to go ahead and procure that regional active strategy. But happy to take the paper as drafted, happy to take any questions on any of the aspects of the technical programme that members may have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mark? And we're happy to note or agree all of the recommendations as printed. Thank you very much. So we now come to communications and stakeholder. So Lucy.
Sorry, you've got me today.
Not Lucy.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is just to update you on recent comms and engagement activities. Obviously, we've already discussed all of the work that we've been doing to support the finalisation of the strategic investment plan and to prepare ourselves for launching that. In addition to that, our stakeholder engagement has continued in support of our technical programme, so covering work streams including Bus Back Better, EV, Future Mobility, Centre of Excellence and Freight and Logistics. Where appropriate, we are working with our neighbouring STBs to make sure that we aren't duplicating efforts and to try and avoid stakeholder fatigue where there may be a number of stakeholders that are involved in projects within our region as well as within theirs. There's been a number of comms and engagement meetings that have been happening over the last few months. So the comms and engagement group on which lots of your own comms colleagues sit, that happened recently, and we provided an update on where we were with the strategic investment plan and the plans to launch that. So they've already seen and are aware of the communications materials that we've provided. The next meeting of the Comms and Engagement Group will take place in March and will include an update from Transport for London about the extension of the ULEZ. The Universities Group also met virtually on the 25th of January. Presentations and discussions covered active travel and centres of excellence. The meeting was well attended and facilitated some very positive conversations and knowledge sharing. In addition to this, the private sector stakeholder group also met at the end of January in London and discussed current challenges and priorities regarding private sector investment in infrastructure. The next session will focus on how to best attract private sector investment in scheme development. We are, as always, still developing a programme of events and speaker slots for Transport for the South East to attend. We try to identify slots that will provide beneficial engagement for TFSE, and so far we have got slots confirmed at the Rail Future annual meeting, which takes place in April, ITT Hub conference, which takes place in May. We will be participating or working with our fellow STB colleagues on the joint STB conference, which will take place in June. And as I already mentioned, there will be the Transport for the South East conference happening in September. Also included within the board paper for this item is a communications and engagement plan for 23-24. This has been produced in line with our business plan. Whilst the plan's written to reflect the anticipated activity for the next 12 months, it is a live document, so it will evolve and adapt and change as our work programme grows. There are a couple of significant tasks to identify for you. We plan to do a survey of stakeholders to ascertain a baseline. This will enable us to monitor the effectiveness of our communications and engagement activity, and that's something that we're hoping to do in the very near future. We are also looking at refreshing our stakeholder database. So we have got thousands of contacts on there now, but in order to stay in line with GDPR requirements, we will be refreshing that and reaching out to those stakeholders to check that they do wish to continue being on our database. One of the key focuses of the plan is engagement with MPs in the region, and we will be looking at new and innovative ways to engage with this sector as we continue with the development of the delivery of the strategic investment plan. That's everything.
Question? Comment? An awful lot going on. Thank you very much. So are we going to agree as printed? Thank you very much. So Transport Forum, and Jeff, thank you for making the effort. Stuck on a train for 2 hours?
Exactly. Well, I sat on the train for longer than 2 hours. But
right.
It was 2 hours stints when it wasn't moving at all. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure all of you read through to pages 469 to 471.
Yep.
So we can take all of those as read, and that's not a problem. But I think the most important thing at this stage is to say that the Transport Forum was set up in the very early days to cast a net wide, to get all of the people interested in transport to come along and chip in. I think it's become, in some cases, some people want to concentrate on small issues instead of the bigger picture. And I think the time is right now, as we're in a sort of transition stage in the whole part, in all of the organisation, a transition to decide how we can keep interested people involved without them thinking that they can always have a black ball to drop in the bag about any project they don't like. And I think that's going to be a challenge. We're talking about a new governance arrangement for the whole of TFSE. And I think somewhere in there, the forum or whatever comes from it, needs to take that into account and try and make sure we retain the good bits, but leave behind some of the
very, very delicately put. But I think it is absolutely the right time, Jeff. We do need to make this, keep it relevant, and keep it, as you say, the people that we need to work with on a regular basis, keep them interested, because it's very important. So I'm sure that's been noted, and we'll find a way of taking that forward. Any other comments or questions? David? Yes, on its way.
Well, I agree with Jeff. I stopped going to the forums because they blow your mind, and I admire him keep sharing it. I've got a suggestion: that is, you time limit people to how long they can talk.
Good point. It's noted. We'll do it. We'll add that to the broader review of how it runs in the future. So we have the recommendations on the board. We can accept that. Thank you all very much. So we now come to response to consultation. Rupert.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So there's three responses to consultations. First, the House of Commons Transport Committee call for evidence into the strategic road network. Two observations I would draw out for you there. The first is that we think National Highways' licence should be amended to take account of the evidence base that STB's produced through their strategic investment plans. And the second is that the SRN needs to be considered holistically in the context of other modes as well. So there's more there, but I just thought I'd draw those two out for you. The second consultation response was to the all-party parliamentary group on South East Transport Infrastructure Inquiry. I must admit I was slightly baffled by this APPG, given that we're in the we've produced a SIP which sets out the evidence and the interventions required to transform the South East, but nonetheless we gave evidence.
We did.
Both Councillor Glazy was there, I gave evidence, and Councillor Tony Page, Deputy Leader Reading, and your Vice Chair also gave evidence. And again, a brief summary of that is contained within the document. And then the final one is us wanting to be identified as an interested party for the Lower Thames Crossing. Again, very much aligning with Kent County Council's views on this. I mean, from our perspective, the Lower Thames Crossing is a nationally significant piece of infrastructure, but the surface transport implications around it are of such significance that we think that we should be an interested party, hence that representation. I'm happy to take any questions on any of this.
Thank you. Everybody happy? Anyone want to? Daniel?
Just a quick offering with my ORR hat on. Talking to them about their licence might be profitable or worthwhile in some way. Yeah.
Jeff.
I'll speak very loudly. Oh, thank you. You just want me to speak loudly. It was just an observation, actually, that there is an APPGI, or Party Parliamentary Group on Infrastructure, which is actually where the running of it is under the auspices of the Institution of Civil Engineers. And indeed, there was an evening meeting not so long ago when the guest was actually the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which gave people a chance to chat to them, because of the fact that I was something to do with the ICE for a long while. I get invited to that as well, and I will try and ensure that I feed back anything that comes of interest of those meetings that I can share with everybody.
That's very helpful. Thank you. No other questions or comments on that? Nope. So we agree to recommendations as printed. Any other business? My goodness. Well, I thought that's what I just said, but I may not have said that. I don't know. It's the wrong end of a 2-hour meeting, because that's how long meetings should last. Maximum of. Oh, sorry, one. But there you go. Any other business? I don't want to stop debate and discussion. It's been a really, really important day today. Agreeing the SIP and the amount of presentations we've had and the amount of work that's going on. I just want to say thank you to the whole team and to all of our partners that have got us to this point. It's now back for you to tell your officers, if they're not in the room or listening, how important they are and how much we appreciate that, because without all of that team working together, we wouldn't be here. So I think it is a momentous day, gives us a lot of opportunities now going forward. Question to myself is that we've had some really good presentation today. We only meet however many times we do. As we go forward, it'll probably be exactly the right amount of meetings a year with exactly the right timescale. But I still genuinely think 2-hour meetings is where we should be. But having all come together to not do the job justice. So I'll shut up now. I won't prolong it anymore. But really, thank you very much for making the effort today. I hope you've enjoyed is probably the wrong word, but learned something from this afternoon, because I certainly have. So.
Do you want a board photo?
Do you want a board photo? Does anyone want to be in a board photo?
I think given it's quite a milestone moment, having the full degree to sit, members are willing to have a photograph that we can use in the
Oh, I'm sure we'd be very pleased to. We can stand up here or something. And...
I know, Holly.
Thank you all very much. Come on. If you're not supposed to be here today, that's not my problem.
Hold up one of those.
Yeah.